Holmes was born. Then he got fat, bald, and tired. What's up, Holmes?
Beware your host, Jonathan Holmes.
Hi, everyone. How are you? It's the Super Bowl. Congratulations, you did it. This is my spray bottle that I have to use to keep my pets at bay. For some reason, they're all wanting to be all over me. And I'm here with Nels, rhymes with bells, from Klei Entertainment. How are you, Nels?
I'm very well. How are you, sir?
Not bad. I do ask you to forgive me for my unprofessionalness. It's a Sunday show. It's a from home show. It's a pets show because of that. I don't know if you watch the. Do you watch the Puppy Bowl at all? You a Puppy Bowl fan?
I don't know if it gets broadcast up here in Canada or not, but I certainly would.
Yeah, it's not bad. It is puppies.
Yes, I would watch that over the Human Bowl.
You too.
Yes.
I wasn't aware if you liked the sports or not. What?
Not really.
Is there a big kind of yearly sports unofficial holiday like the Super Bowl is in the U.S. for Canada?
Oh, the Stanley Cup, right?
I figured it was the hockey one. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the Stanley Cup. It's not unlike football. It's not a single day. It's like a best of 7 thing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they still do play hockey here sometimes, but
sometimes, yeah.
No one talks about it. So you're a great guy. You were the director on Mark of the Ninja. Is that right?
Lead designer, yeah.
Lead designer. My mistake.
That's great.
And what were you designing in the game?
The everything. I mean, obviously, like, it was a collaborative work, especially, and there was another one of our designers, Jason Dreger, and our company's founder, Jamie Chang, also obviously contributed. Like, of course, it's like a collaborative effort, like everything is. But in terms of, like, the stuff I groped most directly, I built about half the levels. Jason built about the other half. I did most of the systems design, implemented a bunch of the abilities, although like a lot of the really tight, good game feel stuff was done by our sort of like character-focused designer, Marcus Lowe, who has since left the company, and we all miss him very much. Yeah, just a bunch of the abilities and items, like, yeah, broadly, a lot of the things.
That's a lot of things, and it sounds like there is a line between where what you do starts and where other people ends, but you're all kind of one mind about it. It almost sounds like a rock band.
Yeah.
Does it feel like a band where everyone has their role that they play, but they play off of each other in the
Yeah, that's actually not a bad analogy.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, that's good. I'm gonna steal that. Consider it stolen, pilfered.
And how many people are in Klei Entertainment?
The entire company is give or take 25. The Ninja team, not to be confused with Team Ninja, was initially it was 7 people. Yes, 3 designers, 3 programmers, and myself. And then about halfway through, we did the thing that a lot of games do, where we kind of ramp up and grab everybody else to kind of get it over the hump. And at that point, I think it was like 15 or 16 at the peak.
That's still not a lot, though. That's a
No,
relatively
it's
small
not.
team. And when did it start? When did the production on the game start?
We started March 2011, and we wrapped like end of July 2012, obviously, and then it goes into cert for a few months, and then it launched September 9th, 7th or 9th, something like that, on Xbox Live, and then Steam a month later, October 16th, something like that.
And is it an Xbox and Steam exclusive, or is there any chance it could come to other things?
That's probably it. The game is published by Microsoft, so that kind of precludes the Sony platforms in the same way. We're not going to see Journey on XBLA.
Right.
But yeah, who knows? Like, maybe if the right stuff was there, who knows? Maybe we'd put it on Mac or Linux or something. But obviously the conditions would have to be right.
Yeah. Wow. So, how did it feel when the game came out? For those who haven't played it, there wasn't a lot of pre-release hype that I had heard about it. I knew you guys were working on something new. I'd seen some of the art and a little bit of video, and I was like, oh, it looks like it could be good. Then it came out and just everyone from I think I heard Adam Salzman talking about it. I've heard it's a really like heady, big name video game designers who are thought of to be kind of auteurs of design, talking about how brilliant it was. my friend's ex-girlfriend told me how good it was. Everyone from no matter where you were, if you'd played it, and if you'd gotten past the entry point of, it's a stealth game about ninjas, and that was okay with you, you just loved it. It went through the roof in terms of critical acclaim. So how did that go over for you? At least, is that how it was for you? Because that's how it looked to me, anyway.
Yeah, basically. I mean, we obviously we showed the game at both PAX East and PAX Prime, and then I did like a little mini press junket where I went down to San Francisco and talked to a bunch of people. So I thought that we'd kind of built some measure of awareness, but it wasn't nearly as much as we figured, I guess. So then the game actually came out, and everyone was just like, "Where did this thing come from? Holy crap, it's amazing!" And all of us were just stunned. I remember the on launch day, I was looking over at my monitor at one of our animators, and I was just like, "Bruce, what did we do?" So yeah, I mean, obviously at the end of the game, I enjoyed it. I still enjoyed playing it. There's certainly some folks work on a game for so long, and then when you're done, you're just like, "Oh, thank God, I never have to touch it again." So maybe it is a testament to its quality that even at the end, playing it was still just really enjoyable. But certainly, we were expecting that some people would dig it, some people wouldn't, and then it'd be kind of in the middle-ish, and then everyone was just like, "Oh my God!" We're just like, "Wow, really? Okay, sweet. I'm glad you liked it."
Because prior to this, Klei had done Shank and Shank 2, which went over really well. But I remember hearing a lot more "Wow, I'm really glad these guys made this. The graphics are really good, and there's some fun ideas." But it's not getting loads of 10 out of 10 reviews. And all of a sudden, Mark of the Ninja, a new direction for your company, for your studio, a risk. I thought there's not a lot of 2D stealth games right now, or stealth games in general, that are blowing up the joint, as it were. And there it was. Just everyone was talking about this is how 2D stealth should have done. So how did you guys get the idea to do Mark of the Ninja, and what made you want to go in that direction?
Yeah, so Mark the Ninja existed as a concept, a very, very, very vague concept before I came to Klei. Technically came back to Klei. I'd worked here for a short stint before, and then I left to work at Hothead Games on Deskbank, and then I came back specifically to work on Mark the Ninja. A concept video, I guess, that was it was supposed to look like gameplay, but it wasn't. It was all just totally faked in Flash. It was just a cartoon. But it's supposed to look like gameplay. And so that was basically a 2D thing about a ninja that's kind of sneaky. And that was really about it. So the concept that existed, when I came back and the project started for real was we're going to make a side-scrolling game about a ninja. And that was the only constraints. And I'm like, well, of course it has to be a stealth game. Because I love stealth games, and ninja, that's a good thing to do in a stealth game. So that was kind of where the genesis of we're going to make this very, very deliberately a sneaky thing came from. And then from there it was just a matter of trying to figure out, okay, well, no one's really built one of these things before in 2D, so how do we take that good, great, interesting gameplay that exists in 3D stealth games and then kind of transmute it and have, take a D out and have it still be good.
Yeah, that's quite an undertaking. Of course, there's been plenty of games with ninjas in them, but like you said, very few have taken the heart of what a ninja is supposed to be, which is an assassin who uses stealth in order to get their point across. Their point, of course, being to kill strangers. Ninja Gaiden, famous game. Now it's just straight action. There's no...
Oh, yeah.
And there never really was much stealth in it.
No.
A little bit more, at least sneaking around in the first ones. But
yeah.
Did you... I'm trying to picture what it was like for you to be like, oh, well, no one's actually made a 2D ninja game about what ninjas actually do. I can do this. No problem. Or were you like, I don't know how this is going to go, but we'll give it our best shot and we don't get fired? Or how did you feel going into it? Did you feel like it was something you could definitely do, or was it a big risk?
I mean, there was definitely risk there in the sense that we didn't really have templates to draw upon, right? As noted, no one had really done it, and certainly not at this scope before. Basically, when we started, the only 2D game that was had stealth as a really significant component that I was aware of is just tiny I think it was done in Game Maker. You know Yahtzee, like zero punctuation Yahtzee?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, he made this game called Trilby, which is kind of like elevator action but sneaky. And it's really small, but it's like, oh, that's kind of cool and interesting. But that was like the only 2D stealth game that I was aware of at all. When we started Ninja, as we started to build out Ninja, a couple more sort of came out and people were aware of. Like a Stealth Bastard came out around then.
Oh, right.
After we were
Mark
like
Bacon. Sure.
6 or 8 months into Ninja. And then there's a company in Boston called Lantana Games that are making Children of Liberty, which is also like a 2D sneaky thing.
Hmm.
But there certainly weren't a ton at all. So it was really looking at, it was that process of looking at the 3D stealth games that I loved and was really inspired by, and figuring out, okay, well, how do these things work? How can we make that work in 2D? And then just like trying stuff and iterating on it and trying stuff and repeat until we finally got the stuff that worked.
Huh. It's a big. I've played a few stealth games in the past. Of course, Metal Gear,
Yeah.
Tenchu. I didn't feel that Mark of the Ninja did a lot of those things. It really took stealth into a fast-paced, really action-intensive feeling, almost Twitch mechanic feeling, at least for me. Whereas Metal Gear, I spent a lot of time just under a tank looking at feet. Like, when do I want to actually involve myself with this game, and how long do I want to just wait and
Right.
bide my time? And to me, that's kind of Metal Gear in a nutshell. There's a lot of waiting, be it
Yeah.
through cutscenes or just looking at people, and then all of a sudden it's really fast paced, and then it's not, and that's that juxtaposition makes that series work. But
Mhm.
Mark of the Ninja, it all feels like the meat of the game,
Mhm.
which is why I think people love it so much. Part of why they love it so much. How did you come to the point in development where you'd gotten there? Were there parts before that? Was there builds of it before that where it wasn't so fast paced and so constantly involving? More
Mm,
like a 3D stealth game?
yeah,
Or
not really. The big challenge we had was actually kind of the opposite, where um, initially some of the stuff we built out, it was always a goal to have it so that like if you ever got in a straight up fight with an enemy, it'd be kind of laborious and not really, and like dangerous, and not like it wasn't supposed to feel good, right?
mm-hmm.
But what we initially we just put in like really really basic, vision cone, sound awareness, all that kind of stuff. But the stealth wasn't really very fun. So we're like, well, maybe we need to have like this combat thing be a little bit more robust. So when you do get caught, you have something to do. So we end up building out this kind of like more robust combat system where you'd like change stances, and then you're like your movement direction would become all like enemy relative and all this stuff. And it was totally addressing the symptoms of the disease rather than treating the disease, right? Where the disease was the stealth ain't fun, so we're like, well, let's just put this band-aid on it and give some not stealth stuff that could potentially be fun. But that totally ended up just making it so that people saw that there was this big chunk of game that was kind of about fighting. And then so people thought it's like, oh, fighting is what I'm supposed to do. So they just like run through the levels, maybe try to be a little bit sneaky, but as soon as they get caught, they just be like, screw it, and then just fight people forever. And it sucked, because the whole point was the fighting is supposed to suck, but people thought that's what they were supposed to do, so it just didn't gel. So we just had to take those bits and just keep paring them down until it was like really, really lightweight, until we could and then that kind of helped us see that the problem was the core stealth mechanics were the stuff that wasn't working, and just like sneaking around wasn't fun. So we're like, okay, well, how do we make that part of it good? And once that part was good, the rest just was able to kind of follow from that.
Huh. So because the stealth wasn't how you wanted it at first, you accentuated the rest of the game, but then you thought we can't rely on just that, so then you went back to the stealth and just made everything great.
Yes,
Wow,
basically.
that doesn't sound easy. That must have been a
Nope.
pretty...
It was not at all.
Yeah, sounds like a very stressful process, because when you're going forward on any project, you kind of build off the momentum of, oh, we did this part right, so that feels good. Now we can do something else right, but then you immediately hit kind of a brick wall. Did you find that hurt your momentum, or did you just kind of push through it, knowing that you and your team had what it took to make an awesome game, or did you question yourself at some point?
I mean, I don't think we ever there were definitely bits where I think we internally as a team always knew that if we had like we could get eventually we'd get this figured out. Like, we knew what we wanted the gameplay to feel like. We just had to figure out exactly what it was that, would get us to where we wanted to be.
Hmm.
But during that time, we're like, I hope that our publisher has enough faith in us that they don't pull the plug before we could kind of pull out of this trough. And it's definitely a testament to like honestly working with Microsoft Studios on this was no bullshit, great. Like they have at least, I mean, I can only really speak to the people we worked with directly, but everyone there was fantastic. Like really supportive, great ideas. They never gave us any like thinly veiled creative suggestions about things to do or anything like that. It was really just like, they gave us help where we needed help and otherwise just trusted us to do the stuff that we were good at and just kind of have faith. And, obviously our founder, Jamie, especially spent like a lot of time developing that relationship and really making it, very clear about what we wanted to do. So yeah, that was definitely, there were definitely bits where it was like, oh God, I think we'll get this sorted out, but I hope they don't cancel it in the meantime because this game is terrible right now. Um,
Wow, I can
yeah.
only imagine how that would have. And it was a year of your life working on that. Pretty much, is your full-time thing, or did you work on other aspects at?
Oh no, it was just this. It was mainlining this always.
Wow, yeah. Did the game's look go through a lot of changes? Because it definitely looks like a Klei game, but it doesn't look exactly like Shank or other games from the studio either.
Yeah, not really. I mean, obviously, early on, you're doing a lot of different sketches and concepting and designs to figure out what stuff is. But kind of once we got it mostly figured out, we just kind of ran with that. I mean, granted, okay, that's really underselling how much work we had to do. Like with the character stuff, we got sorted relatively easily. The environment art was a lot more challenging simply because like the game has to feel dark, right? It's like, oh, it's nighttime and I'm sneaking around and all that. But it can't just be black. It can't just be black on black because then no one can see and it looks like butt and that sucks. So there were definitely like serious challenges figuring out, how do we establish the visual language in the level art so that people understand like, oh, these are the platforms I can climb on versus that which is just decor. This is a wall I can climb up. This is a ceiling I can climb up. That one isn't. All that kind of stuff. And our environment art lead, Megan Shaw, she spent a lot of time trying a whole bunch of different things to sort of walk that line between it feeling dark, but it not just being the blackest thing that was ever black. Unfortunately, like we got to the point where we were able to sort all that stuff out, and then yeah, I think it, and then from there it just kind of sailed. We're like, okay, we got this sorted. Now we just gotta do it.
Right. Wow.
Yeah,
It
it's like
sounds.
honestly,
Yeah.
every sort of facet of the game that like this is the thing I think that is really challenging and why lots of studios, don't try to make stealth games or try and they don't work really well or whatever, is that it's kind of twofold. One is that like basically every facet of the game has to be more or less working without significant flaws before you can even evaluate the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're making like an action game, like the enemies don't run to cover quite right some of the time, you can pretty much still just imagine through what that's going to be like when it doesn't suck. But with the stealth game, like if the enemy AI is unpredictable or doesn't behave well when they see you, or you create a noise, you try to distract them, whatever, the entire game is just unevaluable and it just feels like trash. So like the environment art, the animation, the sound, the level design, everything has to more or less be pretty darn good before it comes together at all. And I think a lot of people just can't get it there in time. And fair enough, just sort of pull out, right? I remember like when we started the project, I read the postmortem for Thief, like from Looking Glass, and they basically said the exact same thing, where it's like, yeah, the game didn't really come together until like 6 months before it was done. And I was like, what? Well, I'm sure we won't have that problem. Oh no, never mind. That yeah, okay, this is exactly what they were talking about. Right.
Do you think that's why people tend to shy away from the stealth genre? It's a very beloved genre, but there's not a ton of games in it.
Yeah.
Thief, Metal Gear, like you mentioned, Tenchu is pretty much Dead.
Yeah.
You brought up a few games I hadn't heard of. That what's the one in Liberty or something,
Children of
Massachusetts?
Liberty.
I got to go talk to those people. They
Yeah.
live nearby. Oh, thank
Yeah,
you
there
for
you
that.
go. It's not out yet. But it seems cool. It's all historically and such.
Hmm,
Yeah.
pretty neat. And Assassin's Creed has a little bit of sneaking, at least, and
Yeah,
being
a little bit. I mean, because you don't have. I mean, yeah, you don't have a ton of things you can do to sort of conceal yourself, and you don't have a ton of things you can do to sort of perturb the enemy's behavior. There isn't a ton of stealth expressivity there, really.
Mhm.
Um, but there's a bit. I mean, obviously, recently, there's Dishonored, and which is great. And the new Hitman, which I haven't played. So yeah, there was kind of like a good swath of stuff this year that was sneaky, but it's definitely not compared to just a thing where you shoot men. It's certainly in the minority.
Right, right, right. Do you think that's part of why that is? Because it's such a challenge to
Yeah.
take a nuanced. I mean, stealth in theory shouldn't be fun. A lot of video game things really shouldn't be fun. But like being kind of powerless and having to hide and having so many limits on what you can potentially do, in theory, that would just be a lot of work and people wouldn't get a sense of reward from it. But there's something about stealth games that when people like them, they absolutely love them. And
hmm
Dishonored is one you bring up. So, what do you think it is about the stealth mechanic that makes it fun, or likewise could make it not fun if you did it wrong?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the big thing that I think sets stealth games apart from other, character-based action adventure games, as broad as that swath is that the gameplay flow is all player directed, right? Like most games are more or less built on they're designer centric, and that's not like a value judgment, but it's like you are engaging and succeeding more or less on how the designer has decided you will, right? You reach
Mm,
some. So you cross some triggers, some guys get spawned, and then you have to kill them so you can survive. But it's all reaction, right?
mm,
Even if it's
mhm,
like a puzzle or like a dexterity jumping platforming thing, it's all about basically figuring out the way that the designer said you have to do it, and then doing that. And that's fine. Like you can build fantastic games that way. That like challenge of execution can be awesome. Um, but why I like stealth games and the way I think they're like the big difference is that the challenge is far more player directed, right? So it's kind of like you have this suite of tools and abilities, and that includes just your understanding of the game's systems. But because fundamentally the game can't know where you are because you're sneaky and hidden, like the game can't directly act on you, right? Like it can't have any. It by default it doesn't have any awareness of you, so it kind of has to be kind of operating on its own. Like it's got its own autonomous gears and bands that are clicking and whirring along. So the player comes up and kind of like pokes and perturbs and fiddles with this thing to get it to do what they want to do, but it's all like player directed, like, oh, I want this guy to move over here, so I'm going to do this thing to him, which will give me a way to go over there. But then there's like 30 other ways someone else could have done it.
mm,
And I think that's really interesting. That's a territory that doesn't get explored a ton. I mean, it's more like strategy games or something else, right? But obviously anchored and contextualized in just a single avatar, which I think is really cool and interesting. And I think that's at a very, very high level. I think that's why people are kind of drawn to them, because they give you so much opportunity and ability to kind of have your own agency versus just succeed at the game's terms or try again.
holy smokes! You are good at talking. Man. That was a hard. Well, as I was asking the question, I'm like, you might just be like, I don't know, hiding is fun, and then you jump out, rawr, stealth is fun. I like to hide, but you came at me with this brilliant analysis of the fact that stealth games, you have to create a world first, and then allow the player to want to shake the hornet's nest if they want, and then
Mm-hmm.
deal with that problem as they will, or go around it, as opposed to just having a kind of obstacle course
Yeah,
design where you're just going through the course and dealing with the problems as they come.
yeah.
Huh.
I mean, of
Wow.
course, like all this stuff comes standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Like this is stuff that falls out of like the church at Looking Glass and all that other kind of stuff. So this isn't like wrote from nowhere. Brr, there you
Well,
go.
sure, but you
Um,
retained the info. You take this this game designing thing pretty seriously. You're not just like,
it is what I
my
do.
Yeah, what are, speaking of which, what are some designers, either current or past or whoever just comes to mind, that you look to in terms of trying to learn from what they've done?
Um, yeah, I mean the folks who kind of operated in that immersive sim space, that definitely inspired Ninja a lot. So folks like Doug Church and Clint Hawking and Randy Smith and Harvey Smith and Raph at Arcane, um, those guys I've got a ton of respect for what they do, and just folks who like to really, put a lot of emphasis on systems. Like that's kind of those are the types of games that I find the most interesting. So the folks at Firaxis and Maxis, the big minds there, but also just like the folks like Jake Solomon and other like more in the trenches people who aren't necessarily as visible, but obviously really understand and are fantastic with what they do. And it's not to besmirch the accomplishments of folks who do stuff that's a bit more cinematic in its nature, I guess. Like Rich Lemarchand is an absolutely fantastic guy, and I have nothing but respect for what the people at Naughty Dog do. Like obviously Uncharted is astonishing. It's just for me personally, like that style of game, like I think we can kind of extrapolate out what that can look like.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be cool and interesting, but ultimately it's more recognizable versus like things that are far more systemic and player directed. Like there feels like there's a vaster wilderness there that we're only beginning to kind of poke along, and so that's really cool and exciting.
Absolutely, yeah. I wonder how The Last of Us will turn out. It definitely seems to have more of a bent towards being in a world and interacting with it and finding out what surprises can happen from your
Mm-hmm.
decisions in that world, as opposed to Uncharted, which was kind of a set piece to set piece adventure
Mm-hmm.
overall. So it'll be interesting to see if they take that in that direction. But anyway,
Yeah.
about you, when did you get started in this whole video game making thing?
I started in the fall of 2008.
Oh, that's
Yes.
it?
Yeah, fall of 2008. So not that long, I guess, like 4.5 years now.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
That's like a college amount of time. That's
I guess
like
so.
a totally formative, enough to get your feet firmly planted on the ground, but still with so much ahead of you that you feel like you could do. Do you ever feel like, you know how when George Lucas made Star Wars, he was like, that was good. I did good. And then he came back later and made more Star Wars, and then he was like, how come nobody likes my Star Wars anymore? And to him, it was like the same thing. But to everyone else, it was a vastly different kind of movie. Do you ever
Yeah.
fear that now that you've had this huge hit, hopefully a huge commercially successful game too, that like you don't know what to do moving forward? Are you afraid that you've already kind of peaked?
I hope not.
I hope not either. But I'd be afraid if I'm just
Oh
putting
no no.
myself in your shoes. Like when I
Yeah.
have a huge success, I'm like, oh, how do I follow? I'm only as good as my last project. If my next one isn't as good, then I'm on the decline and I suck
Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. That's the kind of neurosis I would have about it.
yeah. Well, I try not to think about it, but now, no. I mean, obviously, like sophomore slump. It's like, oh, that's a thing. Yeah. So, I mean, the way I address it is just keeping in mind, like that y- things become problematic when you get stagnant, right?
Mm.
Like you always got to be doing something different and like making sure you're never really comfortable, because
Hmm.
if you're comfortable and things get easy, and nothing good is easy.
Hmm.
Um so yeah, that's kind of like how I do it, and just being honest about what we want to make, right? Like I don't ever want to be in the position where I made a thing I didn't want to because I thought it would be capturing some zeitgeist, and it's a thing that other people will like, so maybe we'll make some money. Ugh, like as long as they're honest, interesting. Oh, there you go.
I got to shoot her in the face with water. Come here, dog, so I can shoot you. Okay, I'm sorry. You were saying you don't want to just feed the zeitgeist. You want to be able
Yeah.
to go in a direction that you instinctually want to go. But where do you want to go instinctually at this point?
I don't know. That's the thing we're kind of trying to figure out right now, actually. I mean, not relevant to any immediate thing I'm working on, but certainly something that I haven't really done in the past is build anything multiplayer. So it's like, oh, that could
Mm.
be kind of a cool territory to explore. But there are plenty of other styles of games that I have a great deal of fondness for that I haven't really, poked at all. And there's good, fertile soil there as well.
That's I'm trying to imagine what. Well, I should know a little bit more first. Other than Mark of the Ninja, what are some of the other games at Klei that you worked on?
That's the first one. I mean, like I did a tiny, tiny bit of level concepting for Shank 2, but not in any meaningful way that I can take any kind of credit for at all. It was like a month. So
Wow.
yeah, I mean, during my first brief stint at Klei, I worked on a game called Sugar Rush that was never actually released because the company Klei was making it for, like the home office pulled the plug on them, which is why I left. Because Klei didn't have anyone paying for a game to be made anymore.
Oh wow.
Um, so yeah, then I went to Hothead and I made the first two Deathbank games along with everybody else there. And then I came back to Klei, basically specifically to do Mark of the Ninja. So that's really the first big thing I've done here,
Huh.
like end
I
to
didn't know
end.
you'd worked on Death Spank.
Yeah,
Oh, awesome. Yeah,
yeah.
that's are they still making more of those, do you know? Or is that
I doubt it.
hmm, that's too
Yeah,
bad. It's an
yeah.
interesting
Yeah, they were cool, but I mean, Ron's back at Double Fine now, doing crazy stuff over there, which is super good.
yeah, do you know that Ron guy then?
That I call him Ronnie G. No, it was weird because like obviously Ron was there when we were doing Deathbank, and it was like Monkey Island was one of the formative games I played when I was young. That kind of like it's a thing that I've always loved and had a great deal of like nostalgia and just childhood appreciation for. And it was kind of one of the things that led me to making games and then being like the guy who made that just sits behind my desk and tells me to do stuff. This is weird.
Yeah, and that was geez, Death Spank. That was 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2009, 2010,
Whoa, so
basically.
you had only been kind of in it for a couple years at that point.
Oh yeah, I mean it was basically like my first gig out of university making games. I mean my role on Deathbank was I mean and this is just the weird thing about the industry in general is that like the line between what's a gameplay programmer and what's a scripter and what's a designer is pretty blurry. Like the
Mm.
stuff I did at Hothead was called gameplay programming, but other places would call it, like combat designer or scripter or whatever. But it was the stuff I wanted to do, which is all like very player facing stuff. Like I have 2 degrees in computer science, but I'm not a great programmer. And like the really really close to the metal stuff, like do this renderer thing or whatever, it just doesn't really hold a lot of interest for me.
Mm.
Um, but the more player facing stuff is really interesting and awesome. And that's the stuff that I really enjoy. And I think that in general, like all designers would be better served by being able to be kind of a programmer at least.
So they at least have some idea of what's under the hood, and they can kind of guess as to what will work and what won't for the whole team, or.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ideally, you can implement more of your own ideas, right?
Mm. Hmm.
Like it's just in addition, like always something always gets lost in translation, and there's just on any particular game, the programmers are going to have a lot to do. And if the only thing you can do is hand them a piece of paper or draw a thing on a whiteboard and say, "Now go make this for me, please," um, that's not only slow but maybe problematic because they might not understand what you're saying or whatever. And if you can just mock up your own ideas or just even implement shipped stuff, it just compresses that cycle of idea to implementation so much faster. And everybody should really be able to do that. Who
Yeah.
like is serious about design?
Right, right, right. So you can't expect, you shouldn't go into it expecting, oh, the programmers will just figure this out and understand everything that I envision and be able to grasp that and just
Hmm.
do what I want. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Did when did you get started in developing games for yourself or at all? Uh,
Um. Yeah. So my so
she's doing it
feisty.
way. She's way on the other side of the. It's. I blame the Super Bowl. She's doing it way on the other side of the house too, so I can't actually.
The Mister doesn't go that far. Um. So yeah, so it's interesting. My quote unquote game design background actually it largely rises out of tabletop games like tabletop RPGs, D&D, and the like. Um, because for all intents and purposes, like if you're building out D&D stuff as like the game master, like what you're doing is just straight up game design. Like
Mm.
that's exactly what it is, right? You're taking this existing. I mean, obviously, you're not coming up with the existing set of rules, but you're using a set of rules which you may end up modifying on the fly on your own, and then putting those elements together to build an interesting set of challenges for players, which is exactly what doing commercial video game design is. It's
Right.
just like I mean, you have the advantage of knowing who you're making it for and being able to obviously change it on the fly and all that. But like yeah, tabletop RPGs and board games are actually like that is just game design with any kind of other like any kind of all the other veneers just stripped away. Like it's just
Mm.
pure design, right? Like you can't hide behind awesome acting or really nice graphics or whatever. It's just like either the game is laid bare and either the stuff is good or it's not. Um, so that experience both in terms of like development and mechanics and just kind of understanding how to build an interesting thing that people like was really 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 valuable. um, I just when it came time to make that stuff digital, it was just taking the computer sciencey things I'd been doing and the other RPG board game stuff I'd been doing and put them together and oh ha, that's how this works. I mean obviously that's a gross simplification, but yeah, that's kind of where I got into the whole games are cool and interesting, and I want to make them in a fashion.
Mm. It's it's really interesting. It seems like there's three kind of mind spaces about why people get into playing games and making games these days. There's people that just want the fantasy escapism. There's
Mm-hmm.
people that are looking to like have an impact with like an artistic statement, and then there's people who are just like, I love design. I love the kind of the underlying engineering of what can make something compelling and make it tick, and they don't care about voice acting. They don't care about explaining how it felt when they were growing up and they got picked on through some like artistic metaphor. They're just like, I want to make a design that really compels people. And it sounds like you're more or less in the third camp. But are you? Would you say you have aspects of you that are in the other two camps as well? Is there like some kind of big artistic vision you hope to do, or is there a big like escapist fantasy you hope to create at some point?
Yeah, I mean, the escapist stuff doesn't really interest me at all because it's not like something that draws me to games. Like,
Mm.
I mean, I like things that are interesting, but it doesn't arise out of the man, my life is so boring or whatever, and I just need to forget about what's going on. Like, I think games are interesting because they do have the ability to kind of reflect and say things about the actual world. Obviously, even if
Mm.
it's through metaphor or whatever, like any good artistic work does.
Mm.
Um, but like that stuff is interesting because it says something about people or places or systems or whatever, and that stuff is interesting. So just like the pure escapist, I just want to forget thing is just doesn't have a ton of appeal to me. But I do think that like the best games are about something, and I think like games that are just like pure total mechanic. Sometimes I find those just like a little bit too. I don't know. I mean, I guess I can't totally say that because I've been playing Adam Saltzman's Hundreds, and it's just like it's just elegant, gorgeous, minimal, just pure design, and God, I love that thing so hard, and it makes me so goddamn jealous. Just like this is so slick. How did you? Oh God. So I definitely do appreciate that, but I do also like to think that games are like the games that are really interesting are about something. It doesn't
Mm.
necessarily have to be like a concrete something. It can be a very abstract something, and that's actually really interesting because sometimes it's pretty hard to make a film that's not at least to some degree about like plot and events, right?
Mm-hmm.
But certainly you can make games that are more about like how does a system with a bunch of self-interested agents like reach some kind of equilibrium. It's like, and you could tell that in a film, but it would always be through the lens of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like a game can sometimes just be a bit more direct about that, and I think that's really cool and interesting.
Yeah, it's like the difference between, to me, it's the difference between creating a painting and creating a museum and curating
Mm.
a space for people to be in, to discover things at their own pace, at their own rate. It's definitely still art, but it's a game is almost a way of displaying art, depending on
Hmm.
how you want to do it, or just creating a world. You
Yeah.
can create it like it. How do you know how big Mark of the Ninja is if you were to like run from one block to the end?
It would be long. Well,
Yeah.
no. See, that's the funny thing is that like the when we were the raw space, like if you just stripped out all the encounters and everything, and it was just like geometry, it's not that big.
Hmm.
Um, to the point where like when we initially grade blocked some of the levels, we accidentally like we just did them like just like rough, just lay out the collision in space, and then we put all the encounters and stuff in it, obviously tweaking the space, but we did like a rough complete grade block of an entire level without anything in it but geometry. We accidentally made some levels that were gigantic because it's like, oh, this doesn't seem that big, and then as soon as you put stuff in there, you're like, oh my god, this hour is like this level's like 2.5 hours long. No, no, too big. Um, like the what was it 1, 2, 3, the fourth and fifth levels in Mark the Ninja were original. The one where you set the building on fire and then you're kind of following Karajan around. Um, initially, that was just one ginormous level, and we're like, this no, this is insane. So fortunately, it kind of had a nice natural point where we could just be like, clip. Now this is two separate levels.
Hmm.
Um, but the actual like territory isn't nearly as large as it seems. But the
Hmm.
pace you move through it is just a bit more is yeah is makes it seem really quite large.
Right, right, right. And what? Speaking of which, was there any stuff that you had to cut from the game?
Um, mm, I mean nothing that like nothing was cut in the sense of like, oh man, I wish we could have had that, but we just didn't have time. Um,
Right.
we definitely removed things that just weren't working or weren't good or not. I mean, there were a couple of items that were like not very interesting as we initially set them up, so we kind of like just combine them together.
Hmm.
Um, but there certainly wasn't anything where it's like, man, I wish we had the time to put in X. Um, which is kind of weird to say, but the game is actually like it as far as what we were intending, it is pretty darn complete. Um, which is something I think we're all pretty proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so nice to hear. It's pretty rare that I hear that actually. And
Yeah,
I didn't get a chance to ask. I should have. What made them want to do a ninja game now in 2012? It's again pretty ballsy, I'd say.
yeah. I mean, I think it was just like I think the genesis of the whole we're gonna make a ninja game at all just fell out of the kind of Jamie, the company's founder, and Jeff, our creative director, just kind of saying it's like there hasn't been a good ninja game in quite a while.
Mm.
We have the means to make one. Let's do it. And then I was like, okay, but it's got to be a stealth game.
Well, I'm glad that you. Yeah, I'm really glad that you did. I wonder. Wow, I'm suddenly getting sad thinking about it. Because for me, ninjas, I'm old, so they got played out really hard at a certain time in their life where they
Yes.
were just, Ninja Warrior 3,
Oh
Ninja
yeah.
Warrior 4 came out, Biker Mice from Mars, who weren't technically ninjas, but they were just derivatives of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yep.
Were you even alive for that stuff?
I was totally around for Ninja Turtles. I'm not that young.
Were you alive for the Biker Mice from Mars?
I remember that.
Sewer Sharks?
Maybe not that one.
What about
Or
Samurai Pizza Cats?
I totally remember that.
That makes me feel a little better then.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a relief.
Yeah. No, I mean that was actually kind of like a big challenge thematically, is because like so much of like ninja fiction is just horribly cornball garbage, right?
hmm,
That like it suffers in a way that spy fiction doesn't, right? Like you can have spy fiction, like some of the older James Bond stuff is like just totally goofy and ridiculous, but then you can have the new Casino Royale, and it's like, oh, this is just like a good, well put together thing with gravitas, or
hmm.
the Bourne films or whatever, right? Um, but with ninja fiction, it's like pushing up against that, like this is just cornball nonsense was hard.
I bet it was. Yeah.
And we kind of unintentionally didn't completely get away from it. Like initially, um, uh, like when we came up with the broad, sort of plot and stuff that was going to happen in the game, it's like, all right, in the first like third of the game, we're just going to play it really straight. It's just going to seem like a pretty by the numbers like Ninja Clan revenge thing, and then kind of later on, stuff will like there'll be a bit more nuance about what's transpiring. What we didn't really realize is kind of one just the ratio of gameplay to other stuff kind of makes it so that you kind of forget what's going on. And a lot of people completely fairly kind of saw those initial broad strokes and just assumed, okay, I know exactly what this is, and they kind of slotted it into that, and then the rest of the stuff just wasn't even being processed.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in a sense, that's fine in that, like, I think it's perfectly good that people are able to just enjoy a game and not really care about the theme or the tone or the characters or whatever. That, like, if the thing is just satisfying mechanically and that's it, that's totally cool. Plenty of people come to games and that's all they want. But I think kind of the ratio of people who noticed some of the more nuanced things wasn't quite what we wanted. I mean, it's not that nobody did. Like, there have obviously been some really great, like, enlivening things that we've heard from, both broadly and people we know. And it's just like the ratio wasn't quite right.
Sure. That's tough, though. That reminds me of Jonathan Blow, past guest on this show and a
Mm,
well-known
yeah,
guy. He was really upset when Braid came out because he made it hoping to share certain ideas and express certain ideas, and then people didn't see those ideas. Then he got upset that people didn't see his ideas. He wasn't like angry at them, but he was
right.
angry about the whole thing. He recently said that he thinks a lot of games that are critically acclaimed are dog food. People got really other designers got really annoyed with him for
Yeah.
saying that. I got worried for him because I think people were gonna get mad at him and assume that he meant that they aren't artistic enough or don't have enough like meaning or merit. I was guessing what he meant is that just mechanically the design isn't all that great. There's a lot of really popular games these days where the design is just kind of resting on the laurels of stuff from 10 years ago. It's just kind of a
Yeah.
continuation of the same old ideas without much new to them. But what do you make of this comment, this
Um,
Alpo comment?
Alpo Gate. No, I mean, I think in a sense that there is definitely that we kind of too readily accept stuff that's not great for whatever reasons.
Hmm.
And I don't know exactly where that, I mean, that arises from. Although I think, like, if anything, this year has kind of been, the least worrisome in that regard, right? Because if you look at, like, the it's a weird barometer, but whatever, it works. The like all the game of the year kind of looking back type stuff
Mm-hmm.
that like it wasn't just like jingoistic gray brown man shoots where you waste a bunch of foreigners and save the day, right? It's like this good diverse breadth of like like Journey sitting next to Hotline Miami, which
Mm-hmm.
is sitting next to like uh, Dishonored, which is sitting next to like, and it's like that, like that's what we need,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is diversity. Like when we become satisfied with just like a thing that is just kind of rote and repetitive and isn't really like pushing any barriers
Mm-hmm.
anymore, then we're kind of in trouble, right? But like if anything, I don't think that things are getting worse. Like I think that in that regard, they're the best they've ever been, and all signs point to it's only going to get better.
Yeah.
So I certainly don't feel worried. Like I think that things are definitely moving in an awesome direction.
Well, you have your game, you have Walking Dead, you have Journey, you have Borderlands 2 did really well, you have Dishonored, like you mentioned, you have a huge different, video games used for anything
Hmm.
could be loved instead of in the past where it really did seem like it was more what is the game that fits into this particular box best
Yeah.
that would be the game of the year. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you 100%. It is looking good. And I'm excited to see what you're going to do next. I'm pretty excited about it now that we've been talking, but we've got some questions that I should ask.
Sure.
So bad about asking them earlier.
That's okay.
Sermon asks, any really important hints for stealth game designers? You've already given some great hints earlier, but if
Um,
just going into it right away when you first start, What would your words of caution and advice be?
Oh God. Let me think. Like if I like, what would I tell me like a year and a half ago? I mean, the thing is definitely like get those core stealth systems working as quickly as possible.
Mm,
Like worrying too much about like the specifics of the items or anything else like that is that like that stuff will come, but understanding like the fundamentals of your core stealth systems and how that works with the level design, because obviously stealth games live or die by their level design, right?
mm-hmm.
um, and I'd never done level design before in any meaningful way before coming on Ninja, so that was definitely challenging.
Wow. Yeah.
um,
You're
so
like
yeah,
little Stevie Wonder. You just showed up and started playing harmonica and singing, and they were like, "We love this boy." And then, like 10 out of
that's
10
that's
happened.
that's how I think of myself all the time. We Stevie Wonder.
Next question. Let's see. Yeah, Johnny Viral, a fellow Twitch TV host. He's a great guy. He
Good.
asks, yeah, he's got a show. You should watch it sometime. He puts on a luchador mask and he played Marvel vs. Capcom 3 with the Rock Band drum set. He's a good
Beware.
guy.
Wrong, Johnny.
Oh, I mixed up my Johnnies. Sorry, Johnny Viral. Yeah, I love you too, Johnny Viral. And thank you, Sinistar, for that correction. Johnny Viral asks, did you guys look at games like Tenchu? And we did talk almost about Tenchu before,
Mhm.
but I noticed you did not mention them in your list of influences. So he asked, did you take a look at Tenchu to figure out how difficult Mark of the Ninja should be? Because a lot of ninja games are very hard and eventually frustrating. And if you did look at it, how did that help you to balance the difficulty versus fun?
I mean, we looked at Tenchu a bit. Like I had played the first Tenchu in the past, but it was several years after it came out. Like there was that golden year when Thief, Metal Gear Solid, and Tenchu all came out in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
And Thief was the one that was kind of the most influential to me, both in terms of just like being a person who's excited about design and stealth, and very particularly on Mark of the Ninja. I did play Tenchu, and we poked at it again a bit when we started up on Ninja. Um, so that was there, obviously, because it's the only Ninja game that exists. It's actually about being sneaky, right? So we could not look at it. um, but the difficulty, and I think this comes back to the game being very player directed, is like there's almost amount just when you build a game where the gameplay flow is very player directed, you kind of get some ballast for free when it comes to difficulty because people aren't just succeeding in this like very specific challenge that the game designer has built. Um, that they're kind of gonna do the players will do the stuff that they're competent with kind of naturally.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like they're not going to do a thing that's impossible or like really challenging. They're going to gravitate more toward the things that work for them, like for their particular play style. The only thing you have to be careful with there is not accidentally introducing just a dominant strategy where
Mm-hmm.
the way to win is to do X. So even though you could do Y or Z or whatever, there's only this one thing that everybody does, and that's bunk. You kind of got to, you very much have to approach it with the mindset that, like, we're just going to provide people a bunch of options. All those options are equally valid. Approach it how you see fit. So that was kind of how we got at it. And the other thing, and this is, I think, where a lot of stealth games can kind of go wrong, is you don't want to make, like, having losing progress be like a big penalty. Like I think in general it's pretty bunk when a game increases its difficulty just by putting a bunch of your progress on the line. Where if
Mm-hmm.
you fail, you have to do a bunch of stuff over again. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you've gotten past encounters A and B and you fail on encounter C, why should you have to go back and do the first two again?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like you've already demonstrated your competency there. I mean, so there are a few exceptions, but I think they're basically the exceptions that prove the rule. Like if your design is absolutely as razor sharp and as tight as something like Dark Souls, that you can totally do that. But basically, if you're not at the caliber and focus and just amazing goodness of Dark Souls, that you really got to be very careful when you're like making loss of progress a slider you use to change difficulty.
Mm-hmm. It does speak to a certain overconfidence, I think, when developers assume, oh yeah, they'll want to play through my whole level again. They won't mind.
Right.
They won't mind. But yeah, maybe your level. I mean, really good game design can get away with it, like you mentioned. But but if you're at all underconfident in that, it's a big risk. In the arcade days, they just how did they do it then? Oh, my cat showed up.
Hi, cat.
Oh, Jesus.
that
Super
is
Bowl
that
Sunday
is
I'm
the
having.
best.
Yeah,
Well, I
he's
mean,
all right, I guess.
no. Back in
Um,
the arcade days, they didn't, right? Those games were bullshit because they wanted you to keep dropping more quarters in them.
but
Like,
people did it. That's what's interesting to me is
they didn't have
when
a
I when
choice
it.
not to.
Well, they could have said this doesn't feel good anymore. I don't want to put any more money in, so I'm going to stop. But like when you were talking about the ninja-ness of Mark of the Ninja,
hmm
I know a lot of people whose immediate gut reaction was ninjas. I don't like ninjas anymore, and they like I had to talk them into playing it. And then once
Right.
they did, they're like, "Oh, I do like ninjas again." And when it comes to arcade games, for some reason, people are like, "Oh, I just wasted $10 on Magician Lord on Neo Geo, and I'm just getting killed by the same like red blob." But up, here's 10 more bucks.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out where people's feeling about starting to play a new game or continuing to play a game, where that urge comes from, something I'm still trying to figure out. I don't know if you have any kind of broad stroke notions as to what gets people wanting to play things, but I'd love to
Yeah.
hear about
No.
if you did. No, it's
Yeah. I don't
how
really
would we
know.
know?
Like,
We have to figure it out.
no. I mean, like, especially like the degree to which people will kind of tolerate having their time be abused
Mm,
sort of mystifies me a bit.
me too.
Like, I mean, like we all only have a very finite amount of time, and if something is kind of abusing that, that's like kind of one of the grossest things you can do to somebody, right? Like very intentionally waste their time for reasons that are, crass at best. And I find like especially a lot of games in that mobile social whatever space, like that's kind of what they thrive on, and it makes me feel
Mhm.
really gross. And I
It's
just don't know why. I just don't know why people put up with it. I'm like, do you actually get satisfaction out of this, or do you just not know any better, or is this like playing on these psychological vulnerabilities that we all have in our brains, where we just can't turn it off? Like I don't know, but it's weird to me.
yeah, me too. Oh Jesus, this cat. Can you see him? He's being a real dick. He's just wanting to take over the show. You can see me okay still, right?
Oh yeah, totally. It's just like a little ear poking.
um yeah, people get upset at me occasionally, and by that I mean every day, when I say, geez, guys, I wish you wouldn't do that. You're actually doing something kind of harmful to yourself when you're, be it playing a video game that you don't actually enjoy, but you're just compelled to do it because they've kind of gotten into your head, or any sort of thing. But people say no, free will. Free will means that it's okay for me to do whatever I want. It's for me to decide. So you shouldn't be so pushy and tell me what's a good game and what's not a good game. Similar to what people got mad at Jonathan Blow for, because he was kind of saying you're wasting your time eating food that's bad. You could be eating much better food, which to me is a good thing for a game developer to say. But other people said they were just insulted that he said their taste in food was bad. Anyway,
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely hard. Like, obviously, there's some measure of subjectivity there, but I don't really ascribe to the whole. It's like, oh, everyone has a different opinion about things, so it's like you can just do whatever you want. It's just opinion. It's like, well, I mean, there are objective measures about whether or not a thing is good or is bad, and we all like with any like decent amount of rationality, you can kind of look at it and say, oh no, that thing is actually kind of garbage, right? And it's like, I mean, and it's always weird, especially in the context of something that's sort of finite, where it's like, yeah, Transformers may be garbage, but I mean, I guess if you want to like turn your brain off and just look at a robot explosion for 2 hours, it's like maybe that's fine. Um, but it doesn't prey on your life the way some other things kind of do, I guess.
you mean like
Like
crack cocaine?
totally like crack cocaine. Exactly what I was thinking. Um, but no, I mean, like even that's kind of true, right? Like, I mean, I personally, I believe a consenting adult can do whatever the hell they want with their body. That doesn't mean I'm going to say that doing heroin is a good idea. Because it's
Exactly.
not, right? And I'm never gonna be like, well, it's your choice, do whatever you want. It's like, I mean, in the sense that like you shouldn't be a criminal if you do it, yes, but
Mm.
it also is not a good idea, and I'm not going to be like, well, whatever, everything's just utterly morally relativistic, and we can't ever have an opinion about anything.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. If people weren't so threatened, like when I tell a heroin addict, like I do now and again, I think it would be better if you didn't do it. I'm not telling you that I know that I'm 100% right, but that's my best guess. Take
yes.
it with what you will. And I say the same thing to people who play a video game for, I don't know, 20 hours a week. And then I ask them, do you like that game? They're like, not really. I'm like, ooh, probably shouldn't be playing it then. It's become like a job to you that
Yeah.
you do for no money, for nothing other than like an empty sense of reward that doesn't actually give you any lasting psychological benefits. Yeah,
Yeah.
oof. Yeah.
Yeah. Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
ignoring questions. I'm feeling like a jerk. I should ask some more. Is that okay?
yeah. Go for it.
Okay, good. Spamfish asks, why is 2D so attractive to indie developers at the moment? Is it simply
Hmm.
down to how more focused a medium it is, and mechanics and cost perspective, or is it something else?
Um. So actually, funnily enough, I gave a talk at the Montreal International Games Summit just over a year ago, basically about this kind of like why are 2D platformers the darlings of kind of the indie scene.
Mm.
Um, and while like cost of production is I think a small facet of it, it's definitely not the primary thing. I think the biggest thing is that like as as a particular expression of the form, 2D platformers have been around for a really long time, right? There's something that like we've all kind of grown up with and is all very well understood by both the creators and the audience, right? And so if you're trying to build a game that is trying to say something like expressly through its mechanics, like this game is trying, like for example, Braid,
Mm.
that game is like trying to actually use its systemic nature to be expressive in a way that is unique to games as a medium. That kind of 2D platformers are very well primed to do that because creators have spent a long time with them, so we kind of understand what their properties are, and audiences have spent a lot of time with them, so they're kind of more fluent in how changes to those types of games might be trying to make some statement or produce some very specific effect or feeling.
Mm.
That's the 2-second version of like an hour-long talk.
So it's a language that people know very well, so they'll pick up on little differences. Like if somebody speaks Spanish to me, I'm not going to notice like a difference in inflection, but if they speak English, I'm going to be able to tell if they're, from the South or from Canada or whatever. So
Yeah,
those little changes in intonation in a 2D platformer, a language of video games we all know so well, will be more meaningful. Is
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. That is
Yeah.
actually not a bad way to boil it down.
Oh,
Well done,
thanks.
well done, Holmes. You could give these talks for me.
No, I couldn't. Let's see. Mosky Bear asks, any word on the sequel to Mark of the Ninja? That's what I was hoping you would accidentally say earlier. This is a journalism trick, by the way, for the next time you journalize in the journal. Ask the video game developer, is there anything that you cut from the game? And then they'll be like, oh, there's all this awesome stuff that we just couldn't include in time, which will tell you, oh, they're going to make a sequel. But you didn't say that, so that got me worried. Uh-oh, maybe no Mark of the Ninja 2. But do you
I
think it's
saw your
possible?
trap. Um, e- it's certainly not impossible. Like I think the sort of bedrock of mechanics that we established are still pretty ripe. Like there are things there that we could explore that we just didn't.
Mm.
I mean, it would have to be in the right context. Like I don't think I would be comfortable just making another dozen levels and saying, "Here you go again."
Hmm.
Because that's not really going to interest me, and it's not going to produce the best game, and it's not going to be innovative or anything else. But if there was like a kind of a different angle that we wanted to, that like another idea that we really wanted to explore with that same set of base mechanics, that I
Hmm.
think certainly that could be possible.
I'd love to see it in a Super Metroid-ish kind of a feel.
Mm,
That's often For me, 2D platformer started with Mario and whatever, and then expanded to a Metroid-ish
Hmm.
way of thinking where you weren't just thinking about getting from left to right or from point A to point B, but actually where you wanted to go in a kind of a larger
Hmm.
dynamic system and how the best way to get there would be just to save time or just to have the most fun, to give people that kind of an option. So that would be
Hmm.
fun for me.
Yeah.
Mark and the Ninja meets Super Metroid.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe that would be boring to you though, because Super Metroid-ish type games are a little bit burnt out as well. Some would say.
Maybe. I mean, that is a like as far as 2D games go, that is one that I do have a great affinity for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's actually kind of the thing that I liked the most about Dark Souls was like that seamlessness of it, where it really was like it had all these distinct areas and everything, but it still was that one big interconnected world.
Mm-hmm.
And good lord, like the feeling of unlocking a shortcut in that game is just like the most like, oh my god, yes. Um, and that's really cool. So it's like, maybe there could be some territory there. I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, well, got to do special thanks to me. That's what you do.
Check done.
Backburner asks, do you think stealth games need to reinvent themselves to be relevant or entertaining? We talked about that a little bit, but like you had said, Dishonored, your game, always something going on in the Metal
Mhm.
Gear front. So stealth games have done certain things. Do you think they need to do anything new in order to keep going, or can they kind of keep refining the wheel that they've already invented?
Um, well, I mean, I think the thing that has really been interesting about this genre, subgenre, whatever you want to consider it, is that there has been like a lot of continual innovation in that space in like the last year. Like it kind of went dormant for a while there, but it's definitely like with things like Dishonored and other stuff. Like it seems like there is a lot of innovation. I think that's really what it is. Like it's not like I mean reinvent. It seems so discreet, right? It's
Mm,
kind of like, oh, this thing was this, but then we did something to it, and now it's this other thing.
mm,
And that's not really what I think any style should go. It's like ideally these styles should be constantly evolving. Like they should
mm,
always be figuring out, how can we do something different? How could we do something interesting? I mean, there's always going to be, fits and starts. But where we get into trouble is when we're not trying to do something that hasn't been done before, right? When it's just time to turn the crank and make another widget, and
mm.
that's not good for the form, and that's not good for the audience. That's not. I don't think it's good for the people working on it.
Yeah, but it's weird when I say that. Sometimes when people I talk to say that, sometimes there's a backlash. They're like, "No, video games are a product. Make my product for me, and I'll be happy, and you'll be happy." There's a sometimes a pushback against that, where people don't want video games to kind of aspire to be something more than just an item on the shelf, something to be consumed, and you know exactly what you're getting. I'm still trying to figure out where that pushback comes from.
I don't know, because like I don't think anyone who actually cares about any form of creative expression feels that way about it, right? Like
Mm,
saying that about like a book or about like a music album
mm,
just seems weird. Like no one's like music shouldn't be different or interesting. It should just be a thing I buy on a shelf. It's like, well, I mean, no one else who cares about like forms of creative expression wants that. Like, why anyone would want that in games? I mean, I think if anything, it arises from people just enjoy what they have and they don't want it to go away. But
mm, mhm.
I think very rarely does innovation lead to forms of creative expression becoming poorer.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a time when people tried new things and it ended up making everyone sad in the long run. I
Yeah.
mean, sure, a couple of things. Buster Poindexter saying "hot, hot, hot." That made me a little sad. Are you familiar with him? He's a
No.
guy. He's got a huge mouth. He starred in the Car 54 Where Are You movie. I'm sorry for the tangent. Arzanadu asks, how did you get past the roadblock of putting too much in your first game? I'm still having a hard
Hmm.
time creating my first game because I have too many ideas and I want to implement all of them. Pathfinding, multiple menus with sliding animations, etc.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, of course, like it helps massively just having a bunch of like incredibly talented colleagues that, well, one can get done the stuff that needs to get done, but also know when to say, do we really need this?
Mm-hmm.
But I think nearly all designers have this tendency to make things large and overcomplicated or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very rarely does someone come to a game and it isn't enough. So yeah, it's usually like in general having a smaller number of things that are really well explored and really well understood is almost always going to be better than having like a giant smorgasbord of stuff that's not very well explored.
Mm.
Um, and just in terms of like just simple production thing, it's like you just got to get anything up and running to start. And really, what you want to do is just the simplest bloody thing in the world. Get that going and just keep building on top of it. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, something I was gonna say before I talked to you this much was, yeah, you have to like make a bunch of bad games first and learn from that. But you
Oh,
didn't do
totally.
that. You just made a great game. You're like, oh
I,
yeah, I guess
I
I'll just
did.
make
It's just
one.
no one ever saw them. Um,
Yeah, really? What kind of games did you make that weren't great?
Well, I mean, it was a lot of like that tabletop, the time spending working on tabletop stuff, where it's just like even the number of people exposed to it are like a half dozen of my friends, and when it's garbage, oh, I know that.
Hmm.
Then
But you
just building,
still. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh, and just building smaller things on my own, um, and all that. And again, like this definitely, if there's no way Mark of the Ninja could have been made just by me, just both in terms of a practical front, but also being able to make a thing that's not garbage front. So yeah, it's definitely like this was a team effort built by a lot of really awesome people, and I find it like people who do make a really great thing totally on their own. I have a lot of respect for what they can do because I know for a fact I couldn't do that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm constantly kind of sad and excited for people who are so much better at me than things. But that's beside the point. I did want to ask a little bit. I know this isn't your part. This is your role at Klei, but
Mm,
the art direction of Klei games is really interesting to me in that
mm,
it's not going for like lo-fi. It's not
mhm.
trying to like be wholly abstract, but it embraces a kind of American comic art style
Hmm.
that you don't see very much of. I've always kind of wondered why that is, that so few American video game developers or Western video game developers embrace kind of the illustration style associated with that culture, and instead either go for copying, pixel art
Yeah,
or Japanese illustration style, or just realism with
yeah.
polygons. What do you think it is about Klei and about that style in general that makes it work for your
Well, I
company?
mean, for us, it largely falls out of the fact that I think our entire art team, at some point or another, has worked in feature or cartoon animation.
Mm,
So it's just kind of like in their DNA. That's the stuff they've been doing for a while. And so it gets in terms of games, it just gets bent to a specific and good purpose. I think.
mm,
Why more people don't do it, I don't really know. Um, because I like 2D games a lot. There was at GDC 4 or 5 years ago, Koji Igarashi, he was one of the main Castlevania guys from like Symphony of the Night onward,
oh,
gave
sure.
this great talk about like 2D games versus 3D games and kind of like 2D games are not just 3D games that are not as good. Like
Mm,
in 2D, you have things like they tend to be very 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 precise. You don't really have to worry about camera movement. You have a much tighter but better understanding of space and all this stuff. And when I didn't catch that talk the first time, but when I went back and looked at it after someone mentioned it, it's like, oh, 5 years ago, this Japanese dude basically said why Ninja would work. And it just took us 5 years to figure it out and catch up. Um, that's exactly what it is. Like in 2D, you have or you at least have the potential to have a kind of precision that you can never get in 3D. Just because
mm,
3D is like it's bigger and wider and sloppier.
mm,
Um, Not sloppier in like a value judgment sense. It's just it kind of it's softer. Um,
mm.
versus 2D things which are exact and precise. And I think that you can get things out of that exaction that you can't necessarily get in a 3D game. So I kind of wish that, while yes, certainly amongst the indie space, the sort of piano music plus 2D platformer thing might be a little rote, that I do wish that more people would experiment with different kinds of 2D stuff. Because I think there's a lot of richness there. It was actually awesome to see that not only did they support, but they apparently continue to keep supporting all the really gorgeous Rayman stuff from Ubisoft Montpellier.
Mhm.
Like it looks so good, and it's but no one who isn't Nintendo will do 2D at that scale, right? So it was awesome seeing another big group like put that stuff forward, and I hope more people continue to do so.
It's been something I've puzzled over for a while because Nintendo will sell 25 million units of New Super Mario Brothers, and then 5 million of Donkey Kong Country Returns, and then some odd million of Kirby 2D platformers, and everyone
Yeah.
else is just like, "Oh, that works for Nintendo, but we couldn't do it." But you totally could. You
Yes.
totally could do it. Please just do it. Speaking of Nintendo, I feel so validated by what you've said this day about 2D games as being different than 3D. Because when Ocarina of Time came out, I was sad and like let down. I felt like Zelda had died. Because for me, Zelda was about looking at a character either from the side or preferably from the top and being able to map out your whole space and be like,
Yeah.
exactly how I want to master this space and get around these enemies and do this puzzle. And then Ocarina of Time came out. I'm like, right now I'm looking ahead, and there's like a wolf or something, and I have to walk across this whole field. And there wasn't Zelda to me at all. And since
Right.
then, I've come to embrace the 3D Zeldas for what they are. But I could really use some more 2D Zelda type games. Well, maybe you could make one. That's exciting for me.
I'll call up Miyamoto right now.
You never know. You never know. They're hiring a lot more Western devs. R Xanadu asks again. Oh, oops. The Real Pizza Cats. I almost skipped the Real Pizza Cats. I'm sorry. The Real Pizza Cats asks, why do you think people keep throwing money at the Call of Duty series? It is a little arcadey to me in that you're just plopping in more quarters for the game that's going to do the same thing to you it just did.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I think honestly, most people care about the multiplayer in that game, and it's pretty hard to argue that it's not a well put together thing. Like
Okay.
certainly, Infinity Ward could put together a very good game about shooting men. It's not a thing that has a ton of appeal to me, especially in terms of like what it says about the world and such. But as like a multiplayer thing, like that's something that clearly people like a ton. And if you want to play, virtual paintball, it does that really well. And
Does
that's
it do it better than? I mean, I'm hearing more and more from people who are big first-person shooter enthusiasts that
Mhm.
they just don't feel Call of Duty does that better, or even close to as well as some other games in the same genre that just don't sell in the same
Yeah.
way.
I
It's
don't know.
yeah.
I mean, it's certainly not a thing that I've ever. I haven't purchased a Call of Duty since they stopped being in World War II.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't really know why, but it clearly appeals to some people, I guess.
Yeah, it makes them feel a way. I hate to be just a douche,
Yeah.
but it's who I am. I am a douche. And I think a lot of people just want to feel included and feel like they're doing what everyone else is doing. And that's the game that everyone's buying, so I'm not going to be left out. And I'm going to buy it too, is the mentality, which is really weird for me, having grown up in a pre-internet time when I had no idea if anyone else in the world had played Final Fantasy III on
Right.
the Super Nintendo. I wasn't
Yeah.
playing that to think, oh, well, now I'm doing what everyone's doing. I
Huh.
was like, I am a weird man in the corner drawing Moogles in my margins, and I'm sad, and people are going to think I'm awful if they find out, but I still couldn't help but love it. So this whole, like, playing
Yeah.
video games for how it makes you feel about yourself and how
Huh.
it feels this whole new world I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, yeah. Huh. No, that's interesting. I mean, I guess it basically was like when I rented a game from Albertsons when I was a kid. It was, did I hear about it in Nintendo Power, or
Hmm.
did it look interesting on the shelf? And that was kind of it, right? Like I similarly had no notion if anyone else in the world gave a toss about it at all.
Right.
Um, yeah, and that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a different world now. Internet. I blame the internet because
Yeah.
the Call of Duty boxes. I don't think anyone will disagree with me when I say it's not the box art that compels you. Just a man is standing there. He's in the dark.
He has the
Uh,
gun.
God of Knockers. What a nice or Conquers. God of Conquers. It's Knockers or Conquers. Asks, what would you suggest for people starting out making games? What's step one? Yeah.
Make the simplest game you can, as in like make Minesweeper. Um, seriously, because like there's just a level of of just tech understanding that one has to develop, and if you're trying to actually design a game while you're trying to understand how to make a game, that's really 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 hard. But
Hmm.
if you're just like, well, I know what Minesweeper is. How do I make it? How does it work? So when I click on a square, I see a bomb or a number, or it goes away until it does find a number. But that's not an easy thing to solve at all for someone who's never done it before. So yeah, just make Minesweeper or Snake or whatever. Just make this absolute simplest bloody thing you can, and then start going from there. And of course, keep in mind that like everything you're going to make for a long time is going to be terrible, because everything I made for a long time is terrible, and I'm still kind of surprised that it ever stopped being terrible. Um, and
Well, what do
even
you?
then, like this
Hmm.
is kind of the thing that people never say about games is the fact is all games are shitty for a really long time. It's
Hmm.
just that the good ones figured out how to get better.
Hmm. Yeah.
um, like the best games ever, I promise. There was a point where they were garbage.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's yeah, the first time I build an encounter or implement some ability or whatever, it's gonna be not good. So it's just figuring out how to make it better, and then trying it, making it better, trying it, and just doing that iteration thing over and over and over again.
What do you think motivates you to keep going though? Because with both playing a video game and making a video game, people often hit this point where like, oh, I'm not getting any rewards from this anymore. I'm gonna quit.
Mm,
When you first start making a game and you're like, make a Minesweeper, which wouldn't be rewarding for a lot of people, but for you, it sounded like making the tabletop RPG designs was rewarding even when the results weren't as lofty or as
mm,
well done as you would have liked. But you kept going. Why do you
mm.
think that is?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't really know. I mean, I guess it's just like keeping in mind like where you want to eventually end up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that could be building a level in Ninja. Like although like when they started out, the levels weren't good, but it's kind of like they definitely didn't like it wasn't just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, we have some notion of where we want this thing to go, what we want it to be about, like what challenges are going to arise from it. Is it doing that? No. Okay, well, how's it not? Let's fix that. Is doing it now? Oh, it's a little bit better. Repeat, repeat, repeat.
Mm-hmm. But it sounds like you're able to really grasp onto both the light at the end of the tunnel and the little victories along the way and
Mm-hmm.
focus on them. Because some
Yeah,
people just focus on the bad, feel
right.
sad when it's not perfect right away.
Yeah.
Uh, Conti or Canty, oh hi Canty, how are you? Asks, how do you counteract or balance dominant player strategies in your game design? So when you see people are just playing one way, and it seems like it's become a one-note tune, how would you
Mm-hmm.
go about working around that?
Yeah, I mean, well, the biggest thing that helps with that kind of stuff is just doing a ton of playtesting. And we
Mm,
did for Ninja. We did so much playtesting, more than any other game I've ever worked on in the past, more than any other game Klei's ever done. Um, and it really was like, if something seems dominant, figure out why that is. Right? There could be a lot of reasons. It could just be that the other abilities are as mechanically sound, but because they're effects or the sound or whatever isn't as polished, it seems poorer even though it's not. So there definitely isn't like a single cause for why anything seems dominant. Um, Sometimes it actually is like mathematically, numerically, mechanically dominant. Other times it's just like a feel thing.
mm,
Um, And so, doing a lot of playtesting can help you figure out like why people are doing that, and then sometimes you can just even ask like, why didn't you ever use the smoke bomb? And they're like, oh, because I didn't think it would affect guys. So that, okay, well, we need to make it clear how this thing works
Hmm.
or whatever. But yeah, that kind of like playtest stuff, and then really, really like being analytical and figuring out why isn't this thing doing what we wanted it to do is important.
Hmm. Is it ever hard when there's a mechanic that you really liked exactly the way it was, and you thought it was clearly a go-to thing, and then you have to alter it in order to make it something that makes sense to people outside of yourself in the same way?
I'm trying to think if there's anything like that on Ninja specifically. Certainly, it's easy to imagine that would be the case, and sometimes you just got to be, you got to be cool killing your babies.
Mm.
Um, but you also don't want to just wildly cantilever depending on what someone says to you, right? Like, having intent and vision and stuff like that is all really important. So yeah, it's just kind of like, there isn't really any other way, just aside from saying have good judgment. um,
And your judgment is reflective of who you are as a designer in the end. So that'll be part of your style. And now I'm
yeah.
feeling bad. I didn't mean to say that nobody makes good 2D games other than Nintendo. You guys do, obviously.
Oh
But
yeah,
like
no, I mean,
retail, is
what?
there
Yeah, yeah,
good?
that's exactly what I meant. Like when I'm talking about that, I mean like big publishers. Like no one's gonna put a 2D game in a box that isn't Nintendo or
Why
in the
not?
last little bit Ubisoft. I don't know.
Will they put your games in a box? Maybe. Now that you got 10 out of 10 reviews and making money and stuff.
I mean,
What's going on?
I like digital games. Don't get me wrong. Like I don't
Mm.
want our thing in a box because retail is not good for people selling something.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying.
You get taken to the cleaners by putting your thing in a store. It's just
Mm.
ugh, ugh. So yeah, no, I'm perfectly happy that our games are sold directly to people over the internet. That is the best.
Well, I'd
Um,
like to see a box art for Mark and the Ninja too.
but don't get me
Gosh
wrong.
darn.
If like we wanted to do like a vanity printing of it, like I certainly would take one of those and put it on a shelf.
Yeah, that would be great. I guess it's just about time to wrap up, sadly. Our Xanadu asked another question, though, and it is a good one. And
Sure.
I should have asked it earlier. Any genres you're interested in working on perfecting? Oh, good, my cat's leaving.
Uh,
Also, do you care about genres? Do you care about genres in general, in terms of having some you're more attached to than others?
I mean, working on perfecting that. I mean, the implication of that is that there actually is like a perfect thing, and I think that's definitely not the case, right?
Mm.
Like just, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but like stuff should constantly be evolving and innovating and all that. Are there any genres that I like? I mean, the thing is, like, I've kind of always liked stealth games,
Mm,
so getting to
awesome.
make one was really pretty boss. I don't know. I mean, I really like kind of like city building strategy games, and I've never worked on anything like that. And that's really System Z, and I like System Z stuff a lot, so that could be
Mm.
kind of cool. Do I care about genre? Sure. I mean, in the sense that like, I mean, so what's weird is that like in other media, genre tends to be about content, but in games, it's far more about form. In
Mm.
that, like, an RTS can be about zombies or soldiers in tanks or like moving cargo ever, but the way you interact with it is kind of the same
Mhm.
versus like a first person shooter game about zombies and a strategy game about zombies and blah blah blah. There's like they're all very different. So I care about genres in the sense that there's like a common set of mechanics that they may share, and then that's just kind of shorthand for where you can start innovating and changing things and looking at it in that regard.
Mm.
And there's just certainly some genres that I like personally, either playing or working in. Um, but it's not like slavish, I guess.
Well, it is. It's a relief that you look at genres the way you did because you're willing to take stealth, which so many people thought of as only a 3D appropriate feeling to evoke and ideas to play with, and put it in 2D. And I hope people continue to think outside of the box in that way and see that they've got a full toolbox
Right.
they could be using to make anything they want. Oh, it's wrap up time.
Wah wah.
I really sucked on this episode, Nels. I'm sorry.
I thought it
I
was
had a
really
great
good.
time. No,
I did too.
I misspoke. I said like "nyeh" instead of new a couple of times. These are things going on in my mind the entire time I'm talking. I'm spell checking and proofreading in my mind the whole time. But it's too late because I've already said it live on
You get a
Supplements.
pass from me.
Oh, thanks, Nels. Likewise, you were an incredible, insightful, charming, fun guy to talk to. I hope people follow you on Twitter, which is at
Nels Ormensch. NELSORMENSCH.
and you are a Nels Mensch,
That
to say the least.
that's
And they
me.
can check it. And your games are at Klei, KLEI Entertainment.com.
Yep, that's everything from the studio. Obviously, Mark of the Ninja specifically is just at markoftheninja.com. So yeah, either of those will give you what you need to know.
I'm such a dumbass. You guys made N plus, like the best ninja game about a ninja who's not actually doing ninja stuff, but such an amazing game. And then you
Yes.
came out with Mark of the Ninja, a different take on the ninja feel. You guys are the best ninja developers ever.
Ninja Town. I mean, of course, N Plus was based on N, but yeah. Anyway,
Right.
yes, we did.
Sorry. Okay. Sinistar is telling me to wrap it up. I'm sorry. All right. Goodbye, everyone. Watch the show on Dtoid TV. Listen to it on iTunes. It's called Sup Holmes, and you can follow me at TronNots on Twitter. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.